Welcome, friends, to the Pick Six podcast. I am your host, DPZ. I have the infamous, my good buddy, who has given me an opportunity to play around on his channel, Mr. Dustin at Sports Card Dad, joining me today. Dustin, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on your show, Dennis. This is fun.
Yeah, no.
I watch this show every week, and now I'm in it. This is like it's an out of body experience.
What do you know? What do you know? It's your channel, and you get to be on one of your shows on your channel. I think it's long overdue. I've heard it from many, many people. Like, why don't you guys do a show together? Well, it just hasn't worked out up to this point, but I think it will work out. And you're probably wondering, okay, what the heck happened to Drake? What's Drake doing? Well, Drake's just really busy. His schedule is very much in demand, and it's making him very difficult to do these shows as consistently as we would like to do. So, Dustin's going to step in. We figured this might be the time for him to step in and maybe join up and link up with me, and we can finally do a show together. So here is Dustin. We're gonna keep running with the moniker and running with the show title, and we're gonna do our best to keep tackling those subjects. We'll take stuff that maybe Dustin talks about throughout the week, and maybe we'll sprinkle it into the end of the week show to do a recap on it, how we all feel, bounce those things off of myself as well. So the format's going to be a little bit different, not going to be necessarily asking questions from the audience, but we'll be talking about hot topics, thinking about the hottest topics of that week and maybe covering those things. And we know, Dustin, there's never a shortage of things to talk about. So
never.
So today, what we're thinking about kicking this whole show off with is asking, we're going to have 3 questions, not so much 6, but 3. But these 3 questions are going to come down to price protection and shilling. Now, everybody's talked about shill bidding and price defending and multiple shows, but we wanted to really dive into the topics and see how we both differ in our opinions, because I have a very convicted viewpoint. I know that Dustin does as well, and we want to hear from you in the comments what your stance is, your view is on this whole very controversial subject in our hobby. So without further ado, Dustin, what do you think? Should we jump in?
Let's do it.
All right, buddy.
Where do you want to start?
Let's start right here. Let's start with the first question. This one's a little bit more gray. I think that you're going to get different perspectives from different people based on scenario. I think you mentioned that. But there's something underneath all of this, if you peel back the onion, that I believe needs to be discussed. So here's the question. Is defending the price of a card you own by bidding on it okay if you intend to pay for the card if you win it? What do you say to that?
Okay, and let's also differentiate. So if we're talking about buying a second copy of a card that we own, we're talking about that, right? We're not talking about it's your card at auction and you're looking to, right.
This is a second copy. You already own it in that particular grade. You're just
right. So I think that there's a few different ways that you can look at this. There are instances, and it really depends on the card. There's been instances where I have a copy and there's a second copy that pops up, and let's say there's a couple hours left and it's pretty low. And so part of me, I'll look at it and I'll think, well, man, this would be a great value to add a second copy. So for me, I'm not against adding a second copy, especially if it's a pretty rare card that doesn't typically pop up and maybe it's just slipping through the cracks. Because let's face it, there's a zillion auction houses, and there's sometimes people miss stuff. It happens all the time where something sells for XYZ on Golden and then it might sell somewhere else, memory lane, for less or more or whatever. I think people make a living buying and selling through that arbitrage because we have so many different selling platforms nowadays. So I think if you're somebody that those cards well, I'll use you as an example. So Griffey cards, Griffey inserts, that stuff back to front. Maybe you have a card, I'll just throw out numbers. So let's say you have a $5,000 card and there's another one that pops up that's the same card, same grade and everything, and it's $2,000, and it's coming to an end. Do you want another copy? Do you need another copy? No, not necessarily. But you also you might be thinking, I'm not speaking for you, Dennis, but I guess I'm using you as an example here. But would you buy the card for $2,000 and if you happen to win it? So you go ahead and you put a bid in at $2,300, thinking well, hell, I mean, if I win it at $2,300, then great. I have a second copy that I got for $2,300, and maybe I can trade that to somebody in the Griffey group for another card I like or whatever. You're almost using it as a chess piece that you can then move into another card with. I think it depends on, I don't think it's bad adding second, third copies, fourth copies if you're finding them at value. I feel like there's also a lot of fun in just finding underpriced stuff. I think that's a lot of what the eBay hunting is too. It's number one, you're looking for like, okay, rare cards that never pop up. You probably have like save searches on eBay where it's like this thing never pops up, but you know, I've got that save search there, and if it pops up, I'm looking for it. But then there's also the element of like, you know, if there's just good value that comes up, then you know, maybe that's something where you can get into it at a low price, and it's just a smart buy overall.
Right. Well, while I understand the sentiment there, and if it is just your intention to pick up another copy, to try to get a better copy at a good price, I understand that sentiment. My issue is we don't really truly ever we'll never truly understand the intention, what's going on in a collector's brain, who this collector is. The transparency is not there with any of these auction houses or eBay. So some people could be going in there just to push up the price, to defend it, to get it to at least close to what they paid. So that, because here's the other side of the coin. You buy that card at $2,000, but you bought it at $5,000 a few months earlier. Now the new comp is $2,000. Now you've actually participated in the devaluing of your card, at least momentarily. So I question why you would want to do that if that card means a lot to you, because now you've brought it down the price, and maybe it stays down there for a while, and you really were the impetus of that. I mean, we will never know if someone's actually intentionally trying to bid it up to buy it, or just trying to push the price up too. It's really hard to know that.
Yeah, and I guess, well, and if you're, let's say the bid on that particular card was at 1,900 and you bid 2,200 and you won at 2,200, technically there's somebody there that would have bought it at 1,900 or 2,000 or whatever, like right in there in the same zone. But I do understand your point. I think the bigger problem with what you're talking about is there's a lot of unpaid auctions that are happening. And so, you know, if you're intending to pay for the thing and you buy it and, you know, whatever, then fine. But the big problem though is whether it's eBay. Now eBay is trying to fix it with kind of these auto pay type functions that they're putting in, which I think is fantastic. But you're right. I mean, there's quite a bit of the, you know, someone's got the 5,000, they're trying to bid it up to 3, and then they get stuck at 2,600, then they don't pay for it or whatever, and then it goes back up for auction in a few days. You know, so that's really the bigger problem.
And that's a problem which I feel more like shill bidding than would it be price defending of price of a particular card. And again, I'll make it very clear, I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to own a second copy and not really caring what you pay for it. Either you pay more or you pay less for it than what you paid on the first copy. That's up to you. That's your business. That's your money. My issue is how it affects the next person who wants to buy that card. See, that's what everybody continues to figure out, or to miss, or to let that just escapes the conversation, is what happens to the next buyer. So when I talk about all of this stuff, I'm thinking about the next buyer, because all of us have been that next buyer on a lot of these cards.
Are you talking about the next buyer for the third copy in this instance? Yeah,
the next buyer. Let's pretend for a second. I'll use a card, for example. There's a 95 Griffey Refractor PSA 10. It's a pretty, around 95 finest. It's a card that sells between $2,000 and $3,000. So you buy a card at $3,000 and then it sells for $2,500, and maybe or maybe not, maybe you were involved or not in bidding up the card to $2,500, but if you weren't and it would have sold for like $2,000, now that new comp is set at $2,000. However, if I got in there and tried to buy that copy, I artificially inflate the value higher than what it should have been, because that person, based on that last, or whoever that's third, let's pretend if there's two bidders. If there's two bidders, then it's just two of us. And whenever I stop, that's where, or if I never got involved, it just would have sold there. Now I got involved and it's pushing it up. Now that card is being artificially inflated based off me wanting to buy a second copy. That card isn't that valuable because I'm just buying a second copy based on the value I paid for the first one.
Yeah, but who made it a law that you can't have more than one copy, though?
You can't. Problem is what I'm talking about is what it does to the next buyer.
But what if, let's say what if the collector wants, like, let's say it's numbered to 10, okay, like this card, which would be a rare card or whatever, you know, let's say it's a pop 10. What if the collector's sole collection is just based around like, I want every copy of this thing?
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
and maybe they want it for nefarious reasons, in the sense that they want to be able to control that market. Nefarious in quotation marks, because maybe he or she just wants to own all the
Wants
copies.
to corner the market. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Still, it affects the next buyer. Here's why. Now, when you buy all those copies at a certain price point, the next person, if there's one available, now has to pay north of what you paid to get that card. Now, if that person's just trying to control the market to sell it down the road, it's basic economics. It's supply and demand. It's what happens. My issue is if you're defending the price intentionally to try to keep it close to what you paid, even if you're willing to buy it, now you've artificially inflated that price for the next buyer, where the demand wasn't necessarily there. It was only you going back and forth. This is only with you. This only really applies if there's two bidders going back and forth, because all it takes is two people going back and forth. And if you're one of those people, you're now artificially driving the demand up. Some will say, well, the other person kept bidding up. Yeah, but that other person would have won it if I hadn't gotten involved. And I already have a copy, so I don't really need one. So the true value of that card now for the next buyer should be what I didn't involve myself with, that last price.
So this is what I think is kind of fun about collectibles, because to me, it's like treasure hunting. So, when you're looking at really rare stuff, like the Griffey stuff that you've got and the David Robinson stuff, and name your player, there's all these different kind of, rare things. And I think the one element of collectibles that's kind of like the X factor are the whales. So like, you're saying it could come down to two buyers. It could actually really come down to one. It could really come down to one whale that just wants every copy. And I've run into this with certain, actually, it's a couple of different Jordan card collectors, and they're really like 90s insert guys. I assume they're guys. Actually, I've never met them before, but they have flat out told me, I've got 7 figures of Jordan cards, and when they come up, I'm going to buy them, because that's my deal. And these are whales. They're buying in. And now, what is that, kind of speaking to what you're saying, what does that mean for the next guy that's bidding and trying to get it? They really do control. And what if that guy, is the only one that would pay that for that Jordan card? That's what's kind of, I guess, fun is to me. Now, I know it's not fun for all the other folks that might be trying to get those cards, but I think that's kind of part of the fun of collectibles is, there is kind of this treasure hunting element, and depending on whatever you value, like Michael Jordan and Ken Griffey Jr. are very popular athletes in our space, but maybe for somebody else, it's Porzingis or something, they plays for the Celtics, or kind of like a, Bagwell, Jeff Bagwell or something, rare stuff. And they can kind of corner if they want to treasure hunt for Bagwell, they can do that. And I don't know, but I understand what you're saying. I understand kind of the premise behind it. I don't disagree with it, but I guess I'm looking at it from a different angle.
There's different ways of looking at this. So that's why I said it was a hot topic. There's going to be different perspectives based on the intention of the buyer, but it's almost impossible to ever know the intention of a buyer. You can tell me I'm just trying to get a second copy, but really you're just trying to prop up the price because you don't want to take a 20% haircut on that card because you plan to sell it in like 2 months, and you don't want to see that card go down in value. So now you're going to take a loss. So I'm going to kind of work it up, and sometimes you won't win it. That person will just bid a little bit higher for you because you're like, well, that's not the value I want to pay for a second one. Oh, but you know what? It sold for $4,800. Now it's close to $5,000. I've propped up the price. Technically, maybe I didn't intentionally do it, but it did happen. So now the next person that comes along, or the person that buys your card that you sell, now is paying or going to be using a comp that's not necessarily true or accurate. That is, in my opinion, the biggest issue with the hobby. I don't think it's so much shill bidding as people doing. I think it's that kind of behavior because there's so much gray area. None of us truly understand and know. And it makes me wonder how valuable are any of these cards that are not super, super rare, where you're just convincing someone to sell it to you. I'm not talking about those cards. I'm talking about the cards you're buying at auction that sell semi-frequently, right? Those are cards I worry about because what's the true value? How many people own these copies? And where would they sell if people weren't getting involved like that? And there's probably people that are literally doing it to drive the value up, have no intention of buying it, may not even pay for it, or may pay for it reluctantly, but now they've at least inflated the value and kept it where they wanted it to be. There's people probably doing that, and there's people probably truly trying to buy the second copy, but unintentionally driving up the value for a card that's probably not really worth that based on how many bidders are involved, right? And sniping can happen too, so that always kind of throws everything into a wrench and everything. But I just feel like this whole topic and this whole conversation is very convoluted. It's almost impossible to peel back completely because you can't get into the brains of people. But I mean, you just look at our world, and somebody said this, and I'll always remember this: everybody's going to care about their money before anybody else's money. Most people do that.
I've learned that a lot as well. Yeah, I mean, everyone's in it for number one is what I've learned. That there's a lot of talk about community, and there's a lot of talk about this and that and whatever, and we're all in it together. But I've learned just from what I've watched with my own two eyes,
not at all.
Everyone is really, look. I mean, I've got a small circle for a reason, in this hobby. So, and that's not to take away from, there's a lot of great people, but
there is.
I mean, it's, but yeah, you just have to kind of, just keep your eyes open. Yeah, that's all. But I think what you said, the thing that's very interesting though, because this is where price defense and shill bidding kind of melds together. If you have a card where you have 20 bidders on it, and 18 of those bidders, or 19 or 18, 19 of them were never planning to pay, because, and we'll never know. For every auction, there's kind of this equation, there might be 40 bidders where 5 of them would never have paid, or maybe it's 39 of them would never have paid, and that's kind of the tricky part. I guess that it just kind of falls back to, you have to have a number in your mind of what you want to pay for it. And you can't get swept up in, the bidding's going higher, I got to chase this thing up.
Nobody does that though. But see, Dustin, none of us do that.
Oh, I would say, it depends on what it is. If it's a card that you've been looking for a year and it pops up, then you're going to maybe you chase after it. And I've had that happen. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. If it's something that rarely sells, but you had mentioned an example of stuff that sells more regularly. So, if it's a Johnny Unitas PSA 6 rookie, it's like, you just wait for your copy. And those are pretty steady price points based on eye appeal and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I'd argue some of those cards, those are probably they're just changing hands a lot. It happens. We all change our mind and sell cards, so that's going to happen. It does beg the question: how safe are auctions? Can you really trust auctions based on the transparency right now of the auction houses and eBay? Can you trust them? Is buy it now? Is best offer? Is a private negotiation with another collector a good way to go? I've done a lot of that myself. The downside of that is you're going to pay whatever that person wants, and there's not a lot of wiggle room there. You don't have someone else saying, hey, this isn't really actually worth that. I'm not willing to give it to you, unless you stand your ground and go, well, this is my number, not willing to pay it. And eventually they come to grips with what you are offering. That can happen at some point. But otherwise, you're kind of at the mercy of that seller if they just want to hold that particular card if it's rare enough. But there's also a great joy in owning a card like that doesn't hit auction very often. It's a very rare card. So yes, it does really applies more to the card that sells more frequently. You can see a comp trail that makes sense. You can identify where the value is. It all kind of depends on the nuances. But I just wonder, based off of the behavior of a lot of collectors we've seen over the past few years, I wonder if it's something to be concerned about moving forward. I feel like our hobby is actually growing. I feel like there's a lot of momentum right now, and I don't feel like it's a bubble. Based off what the Fed is doing right now with rate cuts, I see the hobby actually growing fairly a lot in the next couple years. I think a lot of cards are going to start going back up. But I'm also going to wonder, is there true value there, or is that just perceived value, or are people getting involved to try to keep and defend their price of their cards they spend a lot of money on because they don't want to take a haircut if they ever have to sell it? Because the one thing that makes them feel good about if the card's a store of value is your ability to exit that card without losing your hat. So I wonder how much of that's going on and propping up some of the values of some of these cards. So,
yeah, I think kind of part of the good news, and also just to add, I think for viewers too, is when a lot of what you're buying, Dennis, and some of the stuff that I'm buying, it's more on the higher end, and not higher end necessarily like 6 figures, but even if we're talking about $5,000 plus for an individual card, I mean, that's quite a bit of money. You're more operating like lower volume. I just want to have 20 amazing cards, 15 to 20 amazing cards. And that's fantastic, I'm kind of in the same boat. I have more volume than you, but it's kind of like a similar consolidating up into some different things, what I've been doing. But I think that for most of the hobby, it's probably buying singles that are $500 and under, and really kind of, and with those types of cards, I think you run into that a lot less where you can't really gauge out, prices. Like you can market movers that or card ladder that or whatever you want to do and have a good feel. you're in more of a war with on the higher end because it's like what you said. There might be certain you've kind of reached a point. You've got an amazing collection to where, if you're going to add a card, it's got to be pretty special for you to move off of some of the other stuff. And if it's going to be special, then you're going to have to fight somebody for it. And, and then there's always going to be the, man, if I had, what if one had popped up for auction, or, you just don't know. Auctions are so weird today because you do have auctions where they underperform and then some that overperform, on some of this stuff. So it's really hard to do it.
Fair point. No, I'll take that into consideration. I think I'm definitely playing in a different part of the pool. Although I will tell you, I've been buying some cool David Robinson 90s and early 2000 refractors that are like less than a couple $100, and I've been enjoying the heck out of that just because I got this cool little booth thing where I can take pictures of the cards, and now I'm like, oh wow, this makes cards way cooler, even more cool.
Oh yeah. I saw those on IG, and I was going to reach out to you. What are you doing to take those pictures? Because I want that, whatever it is.
Well, I watched a really cool episode with Precious Metal Gents. Shout out to those guys. They got a great show. And they had a collector on that he took all his pictures down and he reposted all his pictures, and he had them all like perfectly centered with black backgrounds, so everything looked uniform. And I was like, well, let me go a step further. Let me buy one of those little lighting kits. For like $20 on Amazon. If anybody wants to know, message me. I'll tell you exactly what I bought. You can buy this little, it's like a little container, and you can put the card in there on a thing and on a stand, and it's got these LED lights, and you put the white background, and you just take a picture with your phone. And when you take the picture on Instagram, you just click on however you want to adjust the lighting and all that. You just slide it all the way over. There's only one thing you can do, and it somehow just creates this really interesting effect. And it's the same for all the cards. Obviously, it looks really cool with refractors and those types of cards. But I'm kind of addicted to it now. I'm like, this is really neat. So
yeah, I need to get the info on that stuff.
I'll get you the info on that.
I'm still trying to find the angle, close the blinds, make sure that there's no light coming in. It's a disaster.
I'll send you the link. It is so cool. It actually makes it introduces a whole new joy to sharing your cards.
Yeah,
and it actually makes some of these cards that are less expensive just look so amazing, which is a whole other conversation. Why that card costs this much and this card, when there's not a whole lot different, that's a whole other mind-blowing conversation. We'll have to tackle that at some other point. But it's been a lot of fun, and highly recommend. I mean, you're going to have to talk to the company about a sponsorship, knowing you. But they're terrific. A lot of fun, and it introduces a whole new way to show off your cards. So.
Cool.
All right. Next question, since we got a little time here. Let's go into this next question. All right. This was posed on the crossover this last Friday, and I thought it was a great question, and I feel like we should probably throw it out here since we're talking about this. On the other side of it, where it can still be a little gray, I guess, is it okay for you as a collector if you can sign a card with a consignment company that now, if they post that card for sale, and you want to buy it back because you changed your mind, the bidding has started, it's too late to pull back on that. I'm someone who has put cards and sent them to my buddy Nick, and I sent my Jordan PSA 1087 Flair. Now I just decided, wait, I just got some more information about some other things, and I'm like, hey, can we just pause on that? Don't list that yet. Maybe can you just move it back into my vault? I don't want to sell that. That's one way. That's a clean way. I can tell you right now, I've done that 1,000 times. It never even hit auction. Wasn't even processed yet. He just moved it back into my vault, and everything's fine and dandy, and I keep it. But once it starts, the bidding process starts. Now that's done. That's moving. You can't stop that train. You shouldn't stop that train once bids are placed. Now that card is live. If you're still in that mode of I changed my mind, I still want that card back, is it okay for you to bid on that card? Or is it not okay for you to bid on that card?
I would say no. I just would never do it. But I think I totally agree with you. Once it goes to auction, then that's it. I think it's probably more of, if I have second thoughts, I'm like, dang, I wish I hadn't auctioned that off. I would just try to find it afterwards. Whoever won it, I would just try to figure out who won the card, try to buy it back from them after. I think that's kind of the way to go, or find another copy. I guess it depends on what we're talking about, Is it a green PMG Jordan or something that you're never going to see again?
Yeah.
If that's the case, then you might just need to let that ride and just say, never going to own that card again, because it's going to go into Nat Turner's vault. He's going to have 2 of them or whatever, But if it's something that's semi, comes up every year or 2 years, look, most cards come back. They come back around at some point. I would just think like, dang, that sucks. But 5 years from now, I'll find that card again, or whatever.
Right. I don't think it's worth the public fallout, because once something like that comes out, if it comes out, it's really, it takes a long time to build up credibility and trust. It takes like a couple seconds to lose it all real quickly. And this will segue into our next question, our final question, but I feel like you got to stay away from that if you can help it. I know the impulse is there, but you got to stay away no matter how rare the card, because you put a lot of other people at risk too, right? Intentionally and unintentionally. So while the intentions can totally be pure on your end, and people that know you well will trust that, but there's just so many other people in this hobby and in our society that are just, they're not going to trust you. We just talked about it earlier. Like, do we trust all these people? It's kind of tough. There's a lot of great people in the hobby, but, and we talked about it earlier as well, people think about their money before your money. And so all that stuff kind of factors in everybody's processing standpoint when it comes to a person doing something or not doing something, right or wrong, or perceived as wrong in the hobby and unethical in the hobby, or ethical in the hobby. So I think that was a pretty straightforward one. There's not a whole lot of meat on that bone. So I think we should probably just leave that one where it's at and roll in, since we're getting close to 30 minutes. Let's roll into our last question. Speaking of falling from grace, and we've had a few people that's happened to. We're not going to name names because that's not what this is about. But if you're someone in the hobby, you're someone that people know well, you don't have to have a YouTube channel. You don't even have to have you don't even have to be a dealer. If you're just someone that's a collector, it's popular within the hobby. There's a lot of personalities in this hobby. If you're someone that a lot of people listen to, trust, and you get caught doing something, maybe it was an honest mistake. Maybe you just had a few too many brewskis and decided to bid on the car. Something got a hold of you and you ended up doing it. You got caught. It came out. In your opinion, Dustin, especially as a person doing this, and I don't want to put you on the spot with this, but is there a pathway? Is there a path back for redemption there? Or are you just done? And with this hobby and kind of how everything works and how it's really difficult to build trust in the first place, are you just done? Is it your time to step away, or is there a way to fight back and earn that back?
I guess it probably depends on what it is. I mean, there's probably some crimes that are worse than other hobby crimes, if you will. If you're someone that robbed a store or something, and then you try to, the guys that trim cards and try to, all that stuff. I don't know. I think that it would probably be something where if somebody was really, really remorseful on a personal level, I think I'm just not really the type of person that's going to hold a massive long grudge or whatever. Typically, right. I think on a personal level, you can forgive and all that sort of stuff, but probably would never do business with them though. So that's kind of like any sort of business type stuff. I would just keep that all separate, and right. That's not, and that's why it's really important. Like what we were talking about, it's just there's not too many rules, to me, like when I look, there's not that many rules, honestly, so it's just kind of like, all you have to do to me is just kind of, just walk the line. Now, just to go off subject a little bit, like card cleaning, I thought card cleaning and card restoration was an obvious kind of no. Trimming is a whole nother thing. That's like like, of course, like we're all idiots if we don't understand that. But, the whole working out edges and, all that stuff. I was shocked to see that a lot of the hobby is perfectly fine. They're perfectly fine with card cleaning. So maybe I'm the old man that doesn't understand. But again, like it would affect, I don't believe in that so much that would affect a relationship. It's kind of like, man, if you're a big card cleaner, then I don't know. Like, I definitely don't want to buy cards from you. It's like, so right. I don't know. It's just tough, but maybe it's kind of political in some ways where some people believe certain things are okay. Everyone has kind of different, moral compass or whatever they think is right or wrong. But again, though, kind of going back to picking who you want to hang out with and who you're, in the hobby and keeping your circle where you want it to be. I think for me, it's really important.
Who you associate with will define you, like it or not. It always will. So like you said, keep your circle tight. That's important. And you want the people that are in your corner looking out for you always as well, all the time. I agree with you. I think if there's anything that you do that could affect someone negatively in a monetary way, you got to fix that somehow, right? You got to fix that. I don't know how you do it, but you got to fix it. If you know it, fix it. If there's a lot of situations, then find a pathway to that, because we want to just take care of one another. You don't want to see someone get harmed or hurt. That's kind of my point and with our first question with the price protection, how does it harm the next buyer? It's something I'm crazy about. I'm not Dan the Card Man, love that guy. I'm not on any of these really, you got these investigative reporters that are on it, right? That's not me. I'm just a collector that is thinking about that and is discerning how that affects me and my collecting, how it affects other people, no matter how much money you're spending. Because money is a relative thing to all kinds of people. $1,000 is a lot of money to one person. It's pocket change to another, and I think that's important to remember. Anyway, hey, this was a great episode, a great first episode. Hey, we want to hear what you guys think in the comments below. As you know, your comment section is always blowing up on all Dustin's daily shows. This comment section has always been very lively. Now you got your boy Dustin in here. We're gonna have some really fun conversations. This one's more kind of led by me. Dustin's gonna have some cool episodes next week, and maybe we'll figure out between now and then some fun stuff to talk about and debate. But today it's price defending and show bidding, and we want to know what you guys think below. Let's go. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about it. I'm really curious to see what people think. So, anything else you want to add, Dustin?
No, thanks for having me on your show. This is fun. Like I said, I watch this every week. I watch it before it goes live, and it's always really good. So no, I appreciate it. I'm excited to be a part of the DPZ team on this one.
Oh, you're awesome, brother. All right, well, it's a lot of fun doing it. Again, like and subscribe, support Dustin and everything he's doing here with the hobby. It's all good stuff. Check out all the links, all that good stuff, and we'll talk to you all later.